Headquarters in Cairo, seizing what they call evidence of human rights abuses. And the hunt for the jewel of the jungle, but are Indonesia's geckos in danger of disappearing? Intense gunfire has been heard before dawn on Sunday in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Let's go straight to our correspondent who is there, Anita McNaught. Anita, can you tell us more?
Well, sustained gunfire for the past half hour of almost every description, semi-automatic rifle bursts and cracks of pistol shots, some tracer fire in the air, a lot of honking of horns, and a couple of police cars parked as they are every night continuously outside our hotel here, screeched and took off at high speed. Now, all that being said, I also rather intriguingly saw fireworks as well, and I've just received a call from our Libyan government contact, should I say, here, the man who keeps a most careful watch over the well-being of AlJazeera in Tripoli, to say that, in fact, it's all a celebration, and that Libyan forces have taken Misrata, Zawiya and Ras Lanuf, and they've taken it in the last few hours. And what in fact has happened is that the people of Tripoli have come out onto the streets to celebrate. And if I were to take myself to Green Square right now, and it's very interesting, we see a mixture of, there's a lot of tracer fire going into the air right now, a lot. And that if I was to take myself to Green Square, I would see that the people were celebrating. But given that the sort of firing that's going on right here at the moment doesn't sound like the sort of wedding celebratory gunfire that you usually hear when people have something to be happy about. I'm not quite sure that walking to Green Square right now would be a good idea.
Anita, I know it's early there yet, but are you seeing any kind of reaction from civilians there?
No, but this would be entirely consistent with the Tripoli that we have lived with for the past week. Dawn is just breaking over this city, and this has been a city in a state of extreme nervousness, a city in lockdown. Until today, we hadn't really seen the shops open much at all. In some districts, there are still quite marked signs of the demonstrations and the limited violence that there's been here. It is a city where anyone who's come out in protest has almost been immediately jumped on by large numbers of security forces, and it's a city where most of its citizens are sitting very carefully back in their homes and waiting to see what's happening. So apart from the big rallies in Green Square, which the government seems to be able to summon, and people seem very happy to go to on a regular basis. And the last time I saw a big celebration in Green Square was when they said they had taken the town of Zawiya, which is just on the outskirts of Tripoli city itself. In fact, they hadn't. It was a premature celebration. But when they said they had, the same fireworks went off over Green Square, and then a huge crowd assembled to celebrate the victory of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi over his enemies. So there is a civilian response, but only in response to what the people here feel is good news for Colonel Gaddafi. Otherwise, what can I tell you? Dawn is breaking over here. There's a lot of fast-moving cars on the street. When I say a lot, relative to the absolutely no cars, that is true of a lot of the time, and moving rather fast. But civilian reaction? Not at the moment.
We're speaking to our correspondent Anita McNaught in the Libyan capital, Tripoli, where there's been reports of gunfire being held. Anita's telling us what she's hearing and what she's seeing. Anita, over the past few days, we've been talking about running battles in different areas around the country and how government forces and rebels are taking areas away from each other. Can you tell us what's been happening in Tripoli? The government's had much control over there. How have they managed to maintain it?
By an extremely heavy security presence. There have not been any serious gun battles since I arrived here a week ago. There's been nothing like this. but there have not been the sorts of fighting anywhere near Tripoli except for this area, Zawiya, that I mentioned a few minutes ago. In the last week, there was one night here where the protesters rose in different suburbs of Tripoli and caused limited damage, mainly to make a fuss. But the city otherwise has been an extremely quiet, subdued city, and on every occasion where it's thought there might be a show of protest, there has been an equally deterrent show of force. Both army tanks and police cars, vans full of police officers at major intersections, and all around the city you see constantly the SUVs of what are a division of the Libyan Secret Service driving around, keeping an eye on things. There's a lot of surveillance in this city, as well as a lot of security too.
Anita, tell us about how the civilians have been coping with the situation in Tripoli at the moment. In many areas, there have been large-scale evacuations. What's it been like in Tripoli?
In Tripoli, they've stayed home. What we noticed was a city, a very subdued city, a city where the shops remained shut as a precaution, where people were not going out into the streets if they could possibly avoid it. Yesterday was the first time we saw any sort of approaching normal numbers of people on the streets during the day, it's been a city where people are waiting to see what happens. It's not been a city where people are happy to go out into the street and engage.
Anita, thanks very much for that. Anita McNaught is our correspondent in Tripoli. We should mention that Anita is under close supervision of the authorities there in Libya's capital. She has been speaking to us and updating us about gunshots that have been reportedly heard in the Libyan capital. We'll, of course, get you more on that as it comes in. But let's show you some of what's happening elsewhere in Libya. These pictures show the aftermath of an explosion at Wada al-Qattara Army Base, that's in the suburb of Rajma, east of Benghazi. At least 39 people were killed and 130 wounded after the depot was struck by 2 air missiles 15 minutes apart. A local doctor says body parts have been found strewn among the debris.
We have found many body parts yesterday inside the depot. We still don't know the identity of those killed. We have found arms and legs.
Now, rebel forces say they're planning to push on to Sirte, that's the hometown of Muammar Gaddafi, as they move towards the capital. AlJazeera's Hoda Abdelhamid has more from eastern Libya.
The opposition forces are now quite close to Sirte, the hometown of Gaddafi. At the moment, they are regrouping, trying to find some sort of military structure for them to continue their advance. They do realize that hitting Sirte is going to be much more difficult than whatever they have met so far, just because it's the hometown of Gaddafi, and also because it's where most of his paramilitary elite forces are based under the direct commands of his sons. Sirte is also a much bigger city than AlJazeera, Breda or Ras Lanouf, so they do expect fiercest opposition from the pro-Gaddafi loyalists. However, they are emboldened. They do have a lot of weapons, heavy weapons. We have seen anti-aircraft guns. We have seen also other kind of rocket-propelled grenades and rocket launcher. Each time a town falls, they basically raid the military base and get more weapons. Now they do say that this is the point of no return. They're going to